study tour looking at the scope of modern slavery in India. I spent a month in January last year visiting a number of organisations and also some academics working in this field. And I was strongly recommended to meet Ramaiah, so I did while I was in Mumbai. The day that Millionaire was first launched on an unsuspecting public, so you can imagine the press coverage was fairly mixed that day. But part of the package was also that we would invite distinguished academics/activists to Britain to spend a bit of time with us here. In fact, Ramaiah's not spent a great deal of time actually physically in this building because he's been visiting other people giving talks elsewhere. He's been to London, he's met with Anti-Slavery International, he's met with the Dalit Solidarity Network, he's been to Coventry, gave a talk in the West Midlands, been to Birmingham, Wolverhampton, met with the Dalit Freedom Network last night, met with some free trade people, and on Sunday, probably the last speaking engagement, he'll actually be addressing the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Committee themselves, who have just purchased a large Masonic hall on Park Street, which they're going to convert into offices and Gurdwara for the Hindu community, Hindu Sikh community in Park. So it'll be interesting to see, given that I suspect something knocking under caste Brahmins, how they cope with Ramaiah's comments about caste as an institution of slavery, which is the title of the talk. When I wrote my report after my month last year for the Gandhi Committee, my view was that modern slavery was never going to be abolished in India until the institution of caste was abolished. That was a prerequisite. I think that went down in not like a lead balloon, it certainly wasn't wildly acclaimed. So it's an ongoing process of drip, I guess. Anyway, enough from me. Very pleased to have Ramaiah here. He's proposing to talk for somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. Question and answer session afterwards, although I'm sure he'll clarify things as he goes along if people are not clear. Then there's some refreshments and a number of us are going up for afterwards. So if you want to join us and continue the discussion, you'd be very welcome to Nick Wilkinson. They're a huge flurry of you. You might have to leave the restaurant and ask the table. Anyway, over to you. Thank you very much.
Very good evening, and I welcome you all for this talk. I know getting people for a talk of this kind is very difficult. I'm happy at least quite many have turned up. First of all, my sincere thanks to Gary Craig and Wilkinson for giving me an opportunity to be here and also to give a talk in other places. And they've been so kind and affectionate towards me to make my life here very, very comfortable. And I thank you very sincerely. I also like to thank the Gandhi Committee and also the Farron's Trust, whose funding has made this visit possible. Today also happened to be an important day in the Indian history. Today is 14th April. It is the birth anniversary of one Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who was born among the so-called untouchable community, but probably is one of the highly qualified, I would say even in the world, because it was in the 30s, he got one PhD from Columbia University, another PhD from London School of Economics. There's an LLB, the Columbia conferred on him. There are a number of other degrees. And in addition that he raised number of social movements against caste dominations and oppression. So today is the day, he happened to be on that day, and throughout his life there was a continuous dialogue, very, very antagonistic dialogue between Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Ambedkar on the issue of caste. So it is a very interesting day it happened to be. So How do I go? We have titled it Caste as an Institution of Slavery, and many of you from this institute and even those from outside must be very familiar with what slavery is, but I am not going into those details of defining what slavery is. But in order to get some base of how caste can also be taught as an institution of slavery, I have just looked into some of these basic understanding of what slavery is all about. So I will just first touch upon to understand what are the essential characteristics of slavery and what are the essential characteristics of caste system and whether they coincide, and what has been the outcome of in addressing this kind of slavery by the government of India. This is what roughly I am going to go about. Slavery is a socio-economic system under which certain persons, known as slaves, are deprived of personal freedom and compelled to perform. The term slavery usually refers to the state of an enslaved person. Sometime before, I also tried to understand myself this particular concept. So I wrote in some small monograph, and from there I picked up the last para, where I have written, slavery reflects on the one hand the mindset or the desire of the enslaving person. Generally, slavery means we look at the enslaved person. I am saying that it is also mindset of the enslaving person to enslave another, and his physical and material and political and persuasive power to do the same. It, on the other hand, also reflects the economic physical bondage to which the enslaved has been subjected to, and his unbound desire to break the bondage, an innate instinct of every species, in all possible ways, even by being silent, so as to live freely like any other free human being. And this is how I try to put it. And generally what happens to the Dalits? Historically, all situations which created slavery were those which commonly would have resulted either from a natural or from social laws in the death of individual, meaning that it is a slightly better option than the death. In order to avoid death, one agreed to be a slave. That is a point Peterson has quoted. The most distinctive attributes of the slave's powerlessness was that it was always originated or was conceived of having originated as a substitute for death, usually violent death. The slaves were treated as legal objects, not as human beings, and therefore they could be bought, sold, transferred, given away, mortgaged, exchanged and lent out, and utilized in all other possible ways. Slaves can be held against their will from the time of their capture, purchase of birth, and deprived of right to leave, to refuse to work, to demand wages. In some socialist societies, it was legal for an owner to even kill a slave. In others, it was a crime. So, slavery, that is the level. Generally, how slavery is produced, and so far the understanding goes, most of the war captives end up becoming a slave in the history. Debt, bondage, poverty is the very usual means through which slavery actually emerged. The children born to slaves also become slaves. And I am adding, this is a new addition I have made, religion can also a potential means of producing slavery. I will come into this point a little later. And the UN understanding of slavery, which says, according to the Slavery Convention of 1926, slavery is the status or the condition of a person over whom any or all of the powers attaching to the right of the ownership are exercised. And this was broadened, the scope of the definition was broadened, saying all work or service which is exacted from any person under the menace of any penalty and for which the said person has not offered himself voluntarily. And Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, no one shall be held slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. More interesting, this I found it very useful for me to understand the caste. The UN says, what constitutes slavery depends on the following circumstances of enslavement. It could be the degree of restriction of the individual's inherent right to freedom of movement. So if there is any individual restricted from going from place to place of his choice, then circumstances can lead to enslavement. The degree of control of the individual's personal belongings, what all an individual can possess. If there is a restriction on that can also cause a potential scope for slavery, the existence of informed consent and a full understanding of the nature of the relationship between two parties. What should be the nature of relation between two parties is also, there is a conditionalities. If there is restriction on kind of relationship two parties can have, that can also lead to enslavement. I mean, these are the common understanding in the UN circle, and all these 3 points are very, very useful to understand whether caste is also an institution of slavery. Slavery exercised through socio-cultural symbols. In addition, slavery can also be exercised through socio-cultural symbols. It is social in the nature of power relations. It involves the use or a threat of violence in the control of one person by another. There is violence here, there is a social relation. And then it involves the excess of psychological influence, particularly the capacity to persuade another person to change the way he perceives his interest and his circumstances. Culture is used as a means of transforming force into right and obedience into duty, a necessity for the powerful to ensure them continual mastership. In order to maintain their control over the slaves, cultural symbols can be used effectively. And the last in this section is, according to Peterson, although Rasu rightly argued that the source of legitimate powers lay in those conventions which today we would call culture, neither he nor Max Weber specified the area of this vast human domain in which the source of authority was to be found. Through this brilliant analysis, he concludes that authority rests on the control of those private and public symbols and rituals processes that include and seduce people to obey because they feel satisfied and dutiful when they do so. If these two understand, in this paragraph, talks how religion can be used to actually convince people to perceive the different way their own situations. Somebody in a particular religion may feel, he may be in bondage, but he may be feeling that I am a liberated person. This religion can be effectively used for giving that kind of an understanding. So, to summarize all that we have seen, which are in fact the essential characteristics of slavery, is one, there is abundant power on the one side, on the master side, and there is absolute powerlessness on the side of the slave. So that leads to slavery. Then there is authority to enslave others exercised through control of those private and public symbols. So you exercise control not only with the economic power, but also use the religion and cultural ritual symbols. Then granting him no socially recognized existence. The society gives no existence. His only existence is being a slave. So he cannot find any other existence, his identity outside that given symbol of as a slave. The excess of psychological influence to persuade the another person to change the way he perceives his interest and his circumstances, which we just discussed. Violence is extensively used to subjugate them, to keep them in slavery bondage. Restriction of the individual's inherent right to freedom of movement, which we talked about, and control of the individual personal belongings, and informed consent and understanding of the master-slave relationship. So roughly, these are the points with which one can understand whether a particular person is slave and what are the means, mechanism used to enslave that person. And the magnitude of slavery, some rough estimates, some some years before 1998, 99, some 27 million, but I am sure it is huge percentage. But this is the data we have. I have just put it here. Now coming to the most important part of this lecture, caste as an institution of slavery. We just discussed what are the parameters with which slavery is understood. Now I want to see whether all those things are applicable when you look at the institution of caste, and that's how I put. Caste has almost all characteristics of slavery. In addition, caste-based slavery has a religious sanction. Slavery has not been actually religiously sanctified so far. Although there are people who argue God has created the master and also slaves. If God did not like slaves, why he allowed for so many centuries the slave trade? So God also wanted the slave system to continue. There is an argument on that line. Some of the scholars do not agree, but in the caste system also some kind of an argument of the kind is talked about. In caste system, just to begin, maybe we'll come a little later to the slides. how caste is now when we talked about freedom, curtailment of freedom is an important characteristic of slavery. In caste system, curtailment of freedom is a very, very important category. As I said, Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, has got a Nobel Award, and also Dr. Ambedkar talked about the essential aspect of freedom for individuals and groups to develop themselves and also for the development of the country as a whole. So freedom is something very fundamental for individuals to grow. Ambedkar says, freedom of mind is the real freedom. A person whose mind is not free, though is not in chain, is a slave, not a free man. One whose mind is not free, though he may not be in prison, is a prisoner and not a man. One whose mind is not free, though alive, is better than dead. Freedom of mind is the truth of one's existence. If there is no freedom to an individual, is no better than a dead man. And that is what he says. So it is essential for every individual to have access to education, wealth, labor and all things. And he says education, wealth, labor, all are necessary for every individual if he is to reach a free and full humanhood. Mere education without wealth and labor is barren. Wealth without education is brutal. Each is necessary to everyone. They are necessary for the growth or development of every human being. So, both the modern Amartya Sen also talked about development is freedom. You can't talk of development in the absence of freedom. So anything that you do in the name of development, if that does not contribute to individual freedom, it is not development. And that is a one-point conclusion he drew. So freedom could be both a means and also an end in itself. So it can be used as means and also what ultimately one wants to achieve. If freedom is what development advances, then there is a major argument for concentrating on that overarching objective rather than on some particular means or some specially chosen list of instruments, which could be education or economic. What people can positively achieve is influenced by economic opportunities, political liberties, social powers, and the enabling condition of good health, basic educations, and encouragement and cultivation of initiatives. Amartya Sen talks about clearly encouragement and cultivation of initiatives and access to economic opportunities, political liberties, social powers. These are there is a special reference to social powers. I'll come what exactly it's a little later. The lack of substantive freedom relates directly to the economic poverty, which robs people of the freedom to satisfy hunger, health care, so on and so forth. Slavery in Hindu caste system. Now, we talked about what are the essential characteristics of slavery and how it curtails freedom, how it makes people deprived of their economic status, identity, social power. And then even the leading economists like Amartya Sen and Ambedkar talked about the necessity of education, employment, decent employment, economic status and freedom of all. Now whether these things, which all you and many other people who define slavery and Amartya Sen and Ambedkar talked about, whether these things are there in the caste system. And that is what is coming to a point. According to Ambedkar, slavery is a very ancient institution of the Hindus. And before even coming to this, I want to make a special plea to all of you sitting here. Because sometimes it is taken negatively. Because when you engage in an academic exercise, there is no scope for being either good or bad, but just speaking the truth. And whenever I end up talking on this kind of an issue, it becomes a little uncomfortable for those who happen to be as part of the Hindus. And I am also Hindu. But Hinduism is not one homogeneous category. There is hierarchy, there is vertical and horizontal divisions within it. So it becomes very unacceptable for those who are above in the hierarchy. So my friends here, if you happen to be from that, please take it in a spirit of academic, nothing else. And with that hope only I am just going ahead. Slavery among the Hindus was never merely an ancient institution which functioned only in some hoary past. It was an institution which continued throughout all Indian history down to the year 1843, and if it had not been abolished by the British government by law in that year, it might have continued even today. While slavery lasted, it applied to both the touchables as well as the untouchables. In Hindu caste system, a section of people called touchables and the rest called untouchables. So he says at that time it was applicable both. There were touchable slaves, there were untouchable slaves. The untouchable by reason of their poverty became subject to slavery oftener than did the touchables. So that up to 1843 the untouchables in India had to undergo the misfortune of being held in double bondage. The bondage of slavery and the bondage of untouchability. The lighter of the bonds has been cut and the untouchable is made free from it. But because the untouchable of today are not seen wearing the chain of slavery on them, it is not to be supposed that they never did. To do so would be to tear off whole pages of history. Right? So meaning that slavery is very much part of the Hindu social system according to Ambedkar. And they were held in double bondage. Freedom denied and slavery sanctified in Brahminic theory of Varna and Caste. Now when you talk of Hinduism, the first thing that comes is Varnashrama Dharma. Basically, the Hindus are divided into 4 Varnas. It is said it is based on their individual characters, qualities. Although Varna means color, that means there is a one theory, Western theory, which says the people from Central Asia around 3000 years before enslaved the local inhabitants of India, and the local people were reduced to be Shudras and inhuman sanctions imposed against them, and so they become the untouchables and Shudras and Ati-Shudra. There is one theory. The other theory, which is the most popular, widely believed and practiced theory, is this what is known as Brahminic theory. And according to this theory, the Brahma, the creator God, the Brahma created the universe, and in that universe he created some as Brahmins and some as Kshatriyas and some as Vaishya and some as Shudra. The Brahmin, those created as the Brahmins, he created from his mouth. Creator God Brahma created a section of people called Brahmins from his mouth, and a section of people called Kshatriya from his arms, and a section of people called Vaishya from, some people say it is stomach and some people say it from the thigh, and the last section of people called Shudra from his feet. And the specific parts of his body from which these 4 categories have been created, also there is a hierarchy. Because it said mouth is supposed to be the purest, most purest part of Brahma. So those who sprang from the mouth became the superior caste of all. And the arms represent the muscle power, and those who came from the arms, called Kshatriya, became the warriors, the people who defended. So because he came from the mouth, the Brahmins are supposed to be the preacher. Education was accessible to them. He is supposed to preach, he is supposed to teach the gospel of Brahma, whatever in your language, put it. And the Vaishya is supposed to be the provider. He is supposed to engage in business, basically, and provide wherever what is needed. And the Shudra is supposed to engage himself in menial occupations to earn his living. Now there is a hierarchy, and there is also sanctity. As you go up in the ladder, from Shudra at the bottom to Vaishya, Kshatriya and the Brahmins, the status goes up. Divinity level goes up. As you come down from the Brahmin down, and the divinity level goes down, and at those who are at the bottom are stigmatized. And not only this, according to this theory, those who are on the top, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, together they are called Savarnas. And the one at the bottom, the Shudras, called Avarnas. Now Savarna means the people who have access to education, employment, political power and wealth. And the Avarnas are people who do not have any of these things, access to any of these things. Hinduism also talks about, it talks about the life. There are 5 tenets of it, so I will not go because of the time constraint. Now, these 4 categories of people also given certain rights and duties from which they cannot deviate. And if anybody deviates, there is a very stringent punishment. Why I am saying that? Because this slavery is a product of religion itself, and how it is executed here, that is what I am trying to say. The Brahmin are declared to be gods on earth. Once a text, this is called, the scripture name is Vedas. Vedas, locally called Vedam. And there are many other scriptures, as Ambedkar said, which also reinforced these ideals and became more and more rigid about it. As per these scriptures, the Brahmins who are supposed to be from the mouth of the Brahma, creator God, are declared to be the gods on the earth. So, in status, they are equivalent to God. And anybody who is a non-Brahmin is supposed to treat them as God. And there is the gods are invisible deities and the Brahmins are visible deities. The Brahmins sustain the world. Right? In purity, the Brahmins are compared with the fire and water, the two preeminently purifying agents. Whatever forbidden acts they do in adversity do not therefore contaminate them. You see, this has a lot of legal implications. You are first of all equated to God, and the next you are say, whatever you do, nothing happens. Nobody should do anything. And this is the scriptural sanction. Only the Brahmins are admitted to the study of the sacred knowledge. Now when you say sacred knowledge, this is the only source of education. There is a ceremony called Upanayana, and when you talk about these 4 stages of life, that is, in the first stage, till about 25 years, every Hindu is supposed to engage himself in education. And then say from 25 to say roughly around 50, you are supposed to engage yourself in family, rearing children, all those things. And then you come, just slowly get out of your family life, grahastha, vanaprastha. And then the last stage is called sannyasa, where you leave your home and go to outside, and in praise of God you sing, and at the end you die and be with the God at the end. So these are the 4 stages of Hindus. Interestingly, these 4 stages has implication to slavery. When you say that the grahastha ashrama, you are supposed to engage yourself in education, but this education is not accessible to all Hindus. Only Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishyas have access. The Shudra constitute 70% of the Hindu population. They are huge mass of Hindu populations, and they have been kept out. And if you add another category called Atishudras, traditionally known as Chandalas, and Mahatma Gandhi called them as Harijans, and popularly they are known as Dalits, and the government of India under the constitution they have been recognized as the scheduled caste. They constitute around 16%. Together, the Shudras and Atishudras alone constitute roughly about 75% of the total Hindu populations. Are these 75% of the Hindu populations kept out of education? And not only that, we'll just come. The promise is until whatever exists on the earth. In fact, the whole world is his property and others live on his charity. The property of Brahmins were exempt from the royal claim. There is no king can take away his property. That's what it means. The Brahmin was exempt from usual taxes. You don't have to pay the taxes also. If a Brahmin who followed his lawful occupation, which means being a priest, found a treasure, he had not handed it over to the king. God created this is on the one side. This is on the one side, on the top of the caste hierarchy. And then what happens to the people who are at the bottom, who constitute around 75%? There is a religious sanction to them as well. And they are called Shudras and Adishudras. And the scripture says God created the Shudra to be the slave of all. It's clear. You don't have to actually cook up and bring it here. It's clearly mentioned. God created the Shudra to be the slave of the rest of the Hindus. And it says further that you have to perform the menial occupations by serving meekly. The word meekly is also there. That you cannot revolt any point of your time, that you have to really adhere to this given ordained job. A Shudra committing adultery with an Aryan or a Brahmin woman shall have his organs cut off and his property confiscated. Now this same kind of a punishment I have also read in the slavery. The black people were never allowed to have any kind of relations with the white, or any slave for that matter cannot afford to have such relations with the women of the masters. There are many other stringent things I don't want to bring in, but unfortunate. A Shudra committing adultery with a woman of the first 3 castes shall suffer capital punishment, or shall be burnt alive, tied up in a straw. Interestingly, I picked up, though Ambedkar has translated most of these things I picked up from a book, very well acclaimed book called Caste and Race in India by G.S. Gure. Many times when you quote this, people also become very antagonistic. You are misquoting, and that is the reason why I don't want to pick up from Ambedkar. I am just picking up a book written by another Brahmin. I mean, he's a very highly acclaimed sociologist in India who had his PhD also from Europe. A person who dies with a Shudra's food in his stomach will be born again as a pig or a Shudra. If after partaking of such food a Brahmin be so unwise as to have a conjugal intercourse, the offspring will belong to Shudra and the Brahmin cannot ascend him to heaven. Because the Brahmin were the mediator between the people and the God. So if at all you have to go to heaven, you have to go through him. And without his blessings, you cannot go to heaven. So he will not ascend you to heaven. So that is the importance given to this category of Hindu population. Though marriage between Brahmin male and a Shudra female is contemplated, yet it is said that such a wife is espoused merely for pleasure and not for fulfillment of religious purpose. And children so born become the Chandalas. The children so born in such a relation, that means the Shudra men and the Brahmin women, any child born to this relation will be labeled as Chandala, meaning worst contemptuous person you can think of on earth is Chandala. That is an abuse. Many times it is used commonly in a village life. You look like a Chandala, you behave like a Chandala. So it is an abusive thing. So on touching a Chandala, now who is the Chandala? We talked about the Shudras. In today's context, they are called backward caste. You must have also, somebody who worked on Indian issues must have heard about OBCs, other backward classes. A large majority of the so-called other backward classes constitute the other backward caste. They are basically backward caste. Here when talking about Chandala, we are not talking about backward caste. Those who are below the Shudras. Interestingly, in the theory, there are words like Antyaja, Antyavashin, meaning they are not the people at the end of the Varna, but end of the village. Even today you go to any village in India, you will find there is a main village, adjacent to that there is a place called Cheri. Mostly the so-called Dalits or Chandala live there, and many times there is a gap between the main village and that village, and one has to really walk a bit to, and there the condition is pathetic. So the Chandala are supposed to be people living in that secluded area in any village system in India. One who touched the Chandala, one must immediately bathe with one's clothes on. If a Brahmin unintentionally eats the food or accepts the presents given by a Chandala, he is outcast. So anybody receiving presents from such a person, he will be outcast. But if he does so knowingly, he becomes equal to a Chandala. Now this is on the social status side comes, and what kind of a punishment he is likely to face. Then you have economic sanction against them. In Manusmriti, which is supposed to be the code of conduct for all Hindus, section that 10.129, I put this section as well here. No collection of wealth must be made by a Shudra, even though he be able to do it. He may be able to do it, but he should not make wealth. For a Shudra who acquired wealth gives pain to a Brahmin. Right? So it causes pain to a Brahmin, so he should not acquire wealth. Then section 10.125 says the remnants of the Brahmin's food must be given to the Shudra, as well as their old clothes and refuse of their grain and their old household furnitures. What should be the economic status of the Shudra? On the one hand, you say that they should not acquire wealth, though you may be capable of doing it because it causes pain to another section. And he says, what should be the property? How will you eat? The remnants of the Brahmin food, the left out food should be given, the left out grain should be given to him. Broken dishes should be used, broken furnitures, these are the properties. Elsewhere they have also mentioned the donkeys. You cannot have cows, but you should have donkeys. Because again, among animals there is hierarchy. Donkeys, pigs are supposed to be the lowly status. So only they are. And even the houses, what kind of houses you must have? You should not have a flat roof. You should have only tin roof. No concrete. It was a tin roofs. So everything has been detailed very much in those things. Due to advantage of time, I am just rushing. But the dwelling of the Chandalas and the Shavapakas shall be outside the village. They must be made. Apapatras means the tins. And their wealth be dogs and donkeys. Anyway, it is there. Shudras, the largest section of the people, was the only one which was denied knowledge. Again, Guru's book. Shudra has no access to any religious rights. If the Shudra intentionally listens for committing the memory in Veda, the Veda was the holy book. If any Brahmin chanting that, and if a Shudra happened to hear that, then you are likely to get very severe punishment. Then his ear should be filled with molten lead or lac. If he utters the Veda, then his tongue should be cut off. If he has mastered the Veda, his body should be cut into pieces. These are all utterances. Women have no business with the text of Veda, the only source of education. A Chandala and a boar, a cock and also a dog, and a woman in her courses, and an eunuch may not see a Brahmin eating. So these categories of sections of Hindus should not see when a Brahmin is eating. Now there is a special, very popular phrase in the Dol Gavar, in Hindi I am saying, Dol Gavar Nari Pasu, Ye Sab Tadan Ke Adhikari, which means basically a drum or an idiot or a Shudra or a cow or a woman will work only when they are beaten. So violence against women is justified here. Anyway. There are a number of such things and very unbearable things written there. And that is why Dr. Ambedkar revolted against these things. And as a protest against such inhuman code of conduct written by Manu and others, Dr. Ambedkar burnt Manusmriti in public on 2 occasions. But these code of conducts of caste or Varna system have not merely remained in scriptures, but got very much ingrained in the people's mind and divinely practiced. They do not feel guilty about committing such crimes. So, because it has gone into the mind so deep, people do not feel guilty of committing such crimes. Unfortunately, such codes, such system of caste were not being supported by well-known national leaders, including Mahatma Gandhi. Please, again I repeat, please don't mistake me for this, but these are historical truths. We have no option but just scrutinize and see what has happened. Position of Mahatma Gandhi on the Varna and caste system. There was a continuous fight between Gandhi and Ambedkar on this, where Gandhi was trying to annihilate caste, when Ambedkar was trying to annihilate caste, and Gandhi was trying to defend it, that caste is good. And there are many things, if you go even the website, you will get, you don't have to rely on what I am saying. Gandhi says, Varna Ashrama means those 4 divisions. Those 4 divisions of Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, that is what called Varnashrama, which later on became a caste system. In more rigid form, the Varna is called caste, and many times it is used interchangeably. Okay, for you to understand this. Varnashrama, in my opinion, is inherent in human nature, and Hinduism has simply reduced it to a science. Now, when you say science, it is everything is based on test and experiments. That's what we call as science. But the very next sentence says, it does attach to birth. A man cannot change the Varna by choice. Now, on the one hand, you say science. For example, in a normal recruitment pattern, we say, whoever is good at computer, you just let him do that job. And whoever is doing some, maybe carpentry, let him do that job. And then his own children, a carpenter children need not be a carpenter. He may become a president of America. Obama, we have an example. You have so many examples. Ambedkar was a Chandala, so-called Dalit, became the finest scholar ever India produced. So it is not necessary, but he says it is by birth. That means when he says Brahmin as a category, all those who are supposed to engage themselves in preaching, means educating others, are supposed to be Brahmins as per the Varna. But it not necessarily that all Brahmins will be intelligent. Not necessarily all Brahmins will be interested in being a professor. Not necessarily all Brahmins will be interested in becoming all the time doing rituals in temples. If you look at your own UK population, a sizable percentage of the Indian people are from this community. A large section of people from this community. And they are engaged in various kinds of works. Not doing just rituals in temples. Not just merely being a professor. Varnashrama, as I interpret it, satisfies the religious, social and economic needs of a community. It satisfies the religious needs because the whole community accepting the law is free to devote ample time to spiritual perfection. Meaning, the entire Brahmin community can devote themselves only in spiritual perfection. Fortunately, they did not follow this. Now you have wonderful people from this community engaged in various kinds of occupations. If all of them will be doing only rituals, I think it will be a big human resource loss. But on the other hand, you have huge section of population not allowed to engage in many other things which probably Brahmins are engaged today. When you have other extremes. The caste system is the same like Varna. The only quick remark, the only distinction between Varna and caste is the Varna was open. In the beginning, earliestly, Varna was open. A Shudra can also move up in the ladder and become a Brahmin, and a Brahmin can also come down to a level of Shudra, subject to fulfilling certain criteria. If you are not good at preaching, probably you should become a Shudra. That was the idea at that time, probably. But over a period of time, a Brahmin seeing that this is a job, very easy to do it, lot of money and status, why should it go to somebody else? How do I stop this process? How I can keep it to myself? And there are subsequent scriptures which said it is by birth. If you have to be a Brahmin, if you have to be a priest, the person should be born in that family only. Anybody else from any other caste or Varna cannot be a priest. So it is decided by birth over a period of time. Now caste and Varna is used interchangeably. I am one of those who do not consider caste to be a harmful institution. In its origin, caste was a wholesome custom and promoted national well-being. In my opinion, the idea that intertwining and intermarrying is necessary for national growth is a superstition borrowed from the West. One of the essential characteristics of caste system was what is known as endogamy, that you will marry only within your caste. And Ambedkar was advocating, unless you break this, you can't progress. And caste will have its effect. And there Mahatma Gandhi says that intertwining and intercaste marriage is a superstition borrowed from the West. Don't go by it. That was his advocacy. Caste system is a natural order of the society and every Hindu must follow the hereditary profession. And prohibition of intermarriage between people of different varna was necessary for a rapid evolution of soul. So this intertwining intermarriage, now again reiterating, is necessary for rapid evolution of soul. When you are in the spiritual path and you want to reach the Almighty, then these are essential conditions. What I mean is one born a scavenger, that means one born a Chandala or a Atishudra or a Shudra, must earn his livelihood by being a scavenger. And then do whatever he likes. For a scavenger is as worthy of his hair as a lawyer or your president. That, according to me, is Hinduism. Now, till the end of his life, he emphasized, you must engage only in your hereditary occupations. Ambedkar countered him repeatedly, then slowly he loosened his position. Okay, education can be given to Shudra also, but his livelihood should be only through traditional occupation. He did not want people changing their traditional occupation. He was very, very categorical till the end of his time on that. A Shudra may not be called a Brahmin, upper caste himself, though he may have all the qualities of a Brahmin in this birth. And it is a good thing for him not to arrogate a varna to which he is not born. It is a sign of true humility. Now in Hinduism, there is something called karma theory. How do you keep the people in the same level, in enslaved level? Now you are born as Shudra. Why you are born as Shudra? Because in your earlier birth, you have done something very bad. Earlier birth, probably you could have been a Brahmin, but you did not do your job properly. That is why now you are born as a Shudra or a pig. That's called transmigration theory. So the karma theory says, Now a Shudra can also become a Brahmin, subject to the condition that as a Shudra, what you are supposed to do, you do it without revolt. Till the end of your life, just sincerely do what you are supposed to be a Shudra, so that you are eligible to become a Brahmin or any upper caste in your next birth. Now by giving this argument, you have finished off an individual ability to go up in life or change your occupation or try out something new. I have 2 daughters. I just asked, what do you want to become? One says, I want to become a Miss Universe. And in India, still it is looked, oh my God, how can a woman walk like this? But this young girl says, I want to become a Miss Universe. Just an exposure in TV program, she says, I want to become a Miss Universe. The other girl says, I want to become a musician, because he is good at singing, all those things. We parents want them to become doctors and engineers, but they are saying, no, I don't want. Why I am giving this? Within a family, within one family, 2 children, each one wanting to become something else. But here is a system, it says the whole community is fit for only this thing. I mean, that what a huge amount of human resource waste by saying that 75% of the Shudra and Ati Shudra population not fit for any other occupation but other than menial occupation. This is what and by making this kind of a thing, conditions, the people at the top have had a comfortable stay, could enjoy whatever you want. You have no competition. You have 5% population of Brahmin, abundant resource, no competitor. So you could go excel wherever you want, whichever field you want, and depriving the large majority of the rest of the population. And that's what. And a real slavery criteria, all those things are getting fulfilled here. If the Shudras leave their ancestral profession and take up others, ambition will rouse in them, and their peace of mind will be spoiled. Even their family peace will be disturbed, Gandhi says. So don't change. I believe in Varnashrama, which is the law of life. The law of Varna is nothing but the law of conservation of energy. Why should my son not be a scavenger if I am one? And my question is, why should the son also be a scavenger? And not only this, then another very powerful personality from India ever produced was Swami Vivekananda. Interestingly, this man was also Shudra caste. You know, a lot of politics is at the highest level in India, as much as you have even in here. And he says, my disciples are all Brahmins. The son of a Brahmin is not necessarily a Brahmin. Though there is every possibility of his being one, he may not become so. Did you not hear that the nephew of Aghora, Chakravarti of the Bazbaza became a sweeper and actually used to do all the menial services of his adopted caste? Was he not a son of a Brahmana? He was going back saying that the Varna was open, which is open, so a son of a Brahmin need not be a Brahmin. It has to be, you have to qualify to become a Brahmin. He was bringing that point. There are a lot of contradictions in some of these statements. If a Brahmin has more aptitude, then having said that, he is showing his point. If the Brahmin has more aptitude for learning on the ground of hereditary than the Paraya, means the Dalits or a Shudra, spend more money on the Brahmins, spend no more money on the Brahmins' education. He is now become very critical of Brahmin. If the Brahmin has more intelligence, more aptitude for education, don't spend money on them, spend entire money on the Parayas or the Shudras. And that's what Swami Vivekananda is saying. Give to the weak, for there all the gift is need. Our poor people, these downtrodden masses of India, therefore require to hear and to know what they really are. Let every man and a woman and a child without respect to caste or birth, weakness and strength, hear and learn that behind the strong and the weak, behind the high and the low, behind everyone there is that infinite soul, assuring that infinite possibility and the infinite capability of all to become great and good. Meaning that everybody can become a great. It is inherent in everybody. He undermines all that Gandhi said. But Mahatma Gandhi says, as years go by, the conviction is daily growing upon me that varna or caste is the law of man's being, and therefore caste is necessary for Christian and Muslims as it has been necessary for the Hinduism and has been its saving grace. How can a Muslim remain one if he rejects the Quran? Or a Christian remain Christian if he rejects the Bible? If caste and varna are in inconvertible terms, and if varna is an integral part of the Shastras which defines Hinduism, I do not know how a person who rejects the caste, that is varna, can call himself a Hindu. This is a very clear statement that you can't be a Hindu rejecting your caste identity. If you are a Hindu, you must belong to a caste, and you must adhere to the caste dharma, what's called the caste code, which is traditionally given to you. The Vivekananda who said earlier, he says now, what is the basis of the India's social order? It is a caste law. I am born for the caste, I live for the caste. Born in the caste, the whole life must be lived according to caste regulation. Earlier he said this, then again the same gentleman makes a point like this. Our caste and our institutions have been necessary to protect us as a nation, and when this necessary for self-preservation will no more exist, they will die a natural death. But the older I grow, the better I seem to think of this time-honored institution of India. So he is also coming back to the same round. It is owing to the caste that 300 millions of people can find a piece of bread to eat. Whereas Ambedkar says much of unemployment problem is because of this. That 75% of the population have not been given proper training and skills, and this huge human resource waste, and that is why India is backward all these years. That's what Ambedkar says. But if it had not been for caste, you would have heard no Sanskrit books to study. But the Sanskrit book was never given to anybody else other than to Brahmins. This caste made walls around which all sorts of invasions rolled and surged, but found it impossible to break through. That necessity has not gone yet. So caste remains. That's what he says. Now, this definition of what caste is all about, many Max Weber, which I don't want to go, because basically they are saying that it is a hierarchy, it is vertical and horizontal division, it is occupation. This is how they define it. Where the other Gandhi and Vivekananda are saying that is a great thing. So let us not read this. Even a Prime Minister of India said in the context of society today, the caste system and much that goes with it are wholly incompatible, reactionary, restrictive and barriers to progress. There can be no equality in status and opportunity within its framework, nor can there be political democracy. Between these two conceptions, conflict is inherent and only one of them can survive. It's rightly said. But all of them uphold. Again, some similar line he is talking about. Now, Ambedkar says that caste system is the system where there is a repulsion towards the people who are down the hierarchy, and there is a reverence to the people above. And in this kind of a situation, the people at the bottom are bound to suffer a lot. That's what he says. He further says caste is an enclosed class. Caste system is also like a class, but the only difference, it is an enclosed class. In class, you can move up. A proletariat can become a bourgeois. If he works if the proper opportunity. In caste, whatever you may become, that stigma attached. The President of India, K.R. Narayanan, was also said, you are a Dalit President. The Chief Justice of India today we have is also, you are a Dalit Chief Justice. And the remarks were made even in public place. You cannot build anything on the foundation of caste. You can't build up a nation. You cannot build up a morality. Anything you will build on the foundation of caste will crack and will never be a whole. Caste devitalizes man. It is a process of sterilization. So, education, wealth, labor are all necessary for every individual if he is to reach a free and full manhood. Mere education without wealth and labor is barren. Wealth without education and labor is brutal. Each is necessary to everyone. They are necessary for the growth of human being. Very important statement he made in 1949. After getting independence, at the time of submitting the constitution he prepared, political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of a social democracy. What does social democracy means? It means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality and fraternity as a principle of life. These principles of liberty, equality and fraternity are not to be treated as separate items in a trinity. They form a union of trinity in the sense that to diverse one from the other is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. He was emphasizing, we have got independence, we have got our own constitution, we can contest election, we can elect our own leaders, but that is a political democracy. But unless at its base there lies a social democracy, this political democracy is of no use, and those who suffer at the bottom of the society will blow up this political democracy one day, if social democracy has not become a reality soon. So the Constitution proclaims liberty, equality of various kinds. And this one particular class which I am very interested, Article 39, Class 2 of the Indian Constitution says, the state shall in particular strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate inequalities in status. So in the caste system it denies economic status in the huge section, and it denies status. Here in the Constitution is clearly written, inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate inequality in status, facilities and opportunities, not only amongst individuals but also among groups of people residing in different areas or engaged in different vocations. People engaged in different vocations are different caste groups. So he was also meaning that every caste should be given importance in enhancing their status and economic opportunity. So accordingly, Constitution talks about right to education, right to decent employment, right to property, wealth, right to representation in decision-making bodies at various levels, right to dignity and safety and security, right to freedom of expression, right to religion, right to public goods and services. All these and a number of other things have been guaranteed in the Indian Constitution under various articles. What has been the outcome? Now you may say, all that we saw as prescription against a huge section of the Hindus called Shudras and Atishudras are irrelevant in today's context, because the Constitution has overwritten all those things. Its Constitution has challenged everything and wrote the reverse of it. That every individual should have a right to education, every individual should right to have property, which were denied in the caste laws. Now the question comes, which law is more effective at this point of time? Is the caste law or the Constitution law? We are caught in that critical situation because still a large majority of those in bonded labor, child labor, trafficking, or any other kind of a thing that you can think of, 80 to 90% of those are by and large from this so-called untouchable Dalits or scheduled caste community. So this is on the one side. But this is not to undermine the fact that many from this community have educated themselves, reached a very high position, although the percentage is very, very limited, but there are significant percent of people from this community have reached a high level. I am one of them, probably. Many engineers and doctors, you have many MPs and MLAs, legislature and parliamentarians. There are also a few scientists from this background, despite opposition, all those things. Some people have even in the science and technology field very high position they have reached. One or two we can count. We had a President of India from this community. We do have the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Balakrishnan. The University Grants Commission at this point of time is headed by one Mr. Thorat, who is also from this community. There are members, planning commission from this community. So there are people. But if you look at the data of the recruitment, the people, the government service, you can clearly see whatever in the caste you can see also in the recruitment pattern. Like you have a grade 1 employee, like all the bureaucrats, government secretaries, under secretary, those people. Then the IPS, Indian Police Service, top positions. Then you have maybe professors and those kind of things. Then the gazetted officers, office assistant and peon and scavengers. There is a reservation, affirmative action, reservation policy under the Constitution. So 15% of the education, jobs reserved for the scheduled caste who constitute 15%. But in the case of the scavenging, those kind of posts, it is 200% reservation, because the tradition expects only this community to be scavengers. So throughout India, most of these, 100% people who officially appointed to be scavengers are all from this community. So it is not 15% there, it is 200%. The representation of the scheduled caste in those kind of jobs, it's 200%. And when it comes to class 1 employee, grade A employee, despite 60 years of implementation of the reservation policy since 1950, you still have a sizable percentage of positions vacant, saying that we have not found a suitable candidate. That's what that situation is going on. Just a quick data. So you have these community have been given special reservation. What we have achieved? We have just some because comparative data you don't get it. But I got some little outdated data, but still it talks of something. 1970, 1999, 1997 and 98. There was a survey of about 150 Indian universities to see what is the representation of this community. The scheduled castes and scheduled tribes supposed to be at the bottom, and it's and the minority. The minority is Muslim, Christians, and others. In social science faculty, 1.7%. And the minority constitute around 15% population. And the representation 1.2. In science faculty, 3.2. When the case of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, their populations together is around 22%, and their representation in social science just 1.2, and science it's 0.5%. The other backward classes, which basically backward caste, whose population is around 52%, and their representation in the social science 6.8 and science is 2.3. The upper caste, whose population is around 15%, their representation in social science is 90% and in science is 94%. Of late 2010, probably if you look at it, the margin must have slightly increased, maybe 1 or 2% maximum in all other things, but by and large it's a huge gap. And there is no affirmative action special policies for this community, but still they managed to go there because they were the first to take advantage of the British entry and their free education, and with that they could excel and they could go all over, and they made use of all that they could achieve this. I'm just going to close it in a few minutes. With regard to the constitutional protection for the safety and security of the vulnerable communities like the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, we have 2 laws: the Prevention of Atrocities Act and the Protection of Civil Rights Act. One is to deal with the untouchability, the other one is to protect them from atrocities. But the data indicates every day 2 Dalits are murdered by non-Dalits, every day 4 Dalit women are raped by non-Dalits. These are the 2007 data every day, and these data actually do not reflect even 50% of the actual crime, because the police is filled with the dominant caste, so nobody would dare going to the police. And these are the reported cases which had the support of NGOs, and they could go. Actually, Indian government and Indian constitution, one of those best constitution, the best machinery we have. See, one cannot actually blame the government in any way. See, it becomes like this. You have a very good machinery. You have a state level commission, national level commission. You have a representation from this community at the parliament, even at the local village level, panchayat. Everything you have. But in the police force, you do not have adequate representation. These positions are not filled. As a result, whenever crime committed, people go to the police, they really scare him, and he runs away from there. He does not take up the case. And taking up the case means you have to go and give a witness, evidence, and the upper caste will threaten you, beat you, all kinds of things. He being a landless, anyway he has to go to the same village, and he may probably go to the same person for his livelihood. So it is virtually impossible for a person from this background actually to make use of these laws which are actually powerful. So violence, subjugation, economic dependence, untouchability, prevention of all that would help Dalits experience freedom have a religious sanction. Thus the caste laws promulgated by Manu and others are more powerful and than the constitutional safeguards. These caste laws goes wherever the Hindu goes and the slavery is perpetuated. I was a bit shocked to know in Coventry last time I saw a book which is this is the book. I immediately got it scanned. So it is not India the problem. It has come to UK, and wherever these people go, it goes there. there is an optional course, it seems. This is the title of this is the cover page of the book. I just quickly run through. The Revised New Approach series is a comprehensive series of core textbook for GCSE. What is that? I don't know. Probably some grade. Written by experienced and well-qualified authors, which can be used alongside all of the major specifications. The books are ideal preparation for GCSE religious studies, long and short courses, as well as being an invaluable resource for non-examined course at key stages. Some of the beliefs and customs about caste are based in ancient scriptures known as the laws of Manu. This is a code of conduct for all castes and stages of life that was written sometime between 200 BC and 200 CE. These scriptures are regarded as smritis or wisdom that is remembered rather than heard. Some of the laws presented here seem very extreme and cruel by today's standard. Ambedkar quoted them in his writings and campaigned for the untouchables. There is some factual error. I don't know whether it's deliberate or somebody made a mistake. All those tribes in the world which are excluded from the community, born from the mouth. This is wrong, first of all. The arms and thighs and the feet of the Brahmin are called dasyus. This is it's a blunder. I don't know what, it's deliberate, it's complete. I don't know deliberate or somebody made a mistake, I don't know. Now this comes, I also quoted there, the dress. Their dress means, he are talking about dasyu and everybody. There means the Shudras. Here, there means Shudras. Dress shall be the garments of the dead. They shall eat their food from the broken dishes. Who? The Shudras and the scheduled castes, whatever. Black iron shall be their ornaments. So you should not have gold or silver ornaments, but only the iron ornaments. They must wander from place to place. A man who fulfills his religious duty shall not seek contact with them. A man meaning a Brahmin, should not have contact with them. Their association must be among themselves, and they must only marry their equals. If one of these people intentionally defiles by his touching a member of the twice born means the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya caste, he shall be put to death. This is quoted by Ambedkar writing. Yes, Ambedkar has taken the scriptures and read that and translated and used it. Now this kind of a thing now is published here in the book. People have raised objection to this. There are some of these people from the so-called the low caste saying that we don't want to tell our children that this is your background. Why are you publishing in the school and making our children feel guilty about or ashamed of their own origin? Why the hell you do it? So they have been raising objection to it. I think I have said enough, and I'll stop you. I will respond to your questions. I hope I tried to say how caste is linked to slavery. Thank you.
Well, you've given us a huge amount to think about. I've just realised why I've had such a disturbed life, because both my grandparents were manual workers on the railway, and obviously I should have become a manual worker on the railway too. But my peace of mind has been completely disturbed by the fact that I've become a professor, and I'm really living above my status, and I apologise to everybody. But, there are a huge number of questions that occurred to me. The one thing I forgot to mention when I introduced Ramaiah, of course, is that last week in the parliamentary wash-up process, the Equality Bill was enacted, and at the last minute, thanks to pressure from the two big Dalit networks in this country, caste has now also become forbidden as a basis for discrimination in this country, which I think is going to place some interesting dilemmas upon the working population in this country. Questions, enough from me. Questions, thoughts. We'll let it run for 20-25 minutes if there are enough questions, and then we'll continue the discussion across the way with some liquid refreshments. Who wants to who wants to start?
And pardon me if I have hurt anybody's sentiment here, please. Yes.
We're fairly broad-shouldered.
Okay.
David. Yes.
I'd like to raise 2 points, if I may. The first is refers you back to the estimate by Bales, of about 27 million. And if I understand your talk correctly, what you seem to be suggesting is that if we're thinking of conditions similar to slavery in India today, we're thinking of caste as a basis for discrimination, equivalent to slavery in some cases, and perhaps Bales has misunderstood the number of slaves in India today. The numbers must be much larger than what Bales is suggesting, and therefore he needs to think about religious practices or religious sanctions as basis for particular slavery. He doesn't his work, he's been able to comment on that. The other thing is, and it goes back to the issue of religious sanction, and its embodiment within Hinduism. I think one of the things that struck me, and when looking through the various pieces that you quoted, and justification of the caste system in India, is that many of those quotations were from people talking in a context where British colonial rule still existed. And therefore, in a way, one might think that what we're seeing there is the defense of Indian tradition against, if you like, an external force, which is in effect trying to impose a new set of values, religiously sanctioned or not, on Indian society. So I'm wondering, in fact, and I'm not here trying to excuse Gandhi, I'm just seeking really some thoughts on the degree to which the sanctioning of and so on and the caste system in India wasn't in part of the action to external colonisation. If that is true, if there's any truth in that, then the degree to which things may actually be shifting in India today in terms of religion and the sanctioning of caste. One of the things that strikes me very forcefully is, of course, that for much of the period through the 18th and early 19th century, certainly the 18th century in Western Europe, religion was quite commonly used to treat the 19th century, most Western European tradition had tended to back away from that to some extent. So I guess what I'm asking is how much movement there is in what I might call post-colonial India in terms of the endorsement of these traditional religious sanctions for caste.
First of all, I agree with all that you said. I mean, right from the first point, you said what would be the magnitude of slavery if this definition is understood. It's huge. I mean, the Indian population and 70% of the Hindu population, it goes in millions. It itself is millions. But all of them are not in slavery. All of them are not in slavery. But most of those people who come under the modern slavery happen to be from this very community. And if you trace the history why, only from this community, and there is a link to it. Interestingly, these scriptures are not taught on a day-to-day basis to the children. But these are all passed on from generation to generation. And as you know, it's very common in India. I come from a village. The moment a child is stepping out of the home, your land, your areas, first of all, most of these people live in their own geographical boundary adjacent to the village. They are not at the center part of the village. They are most of the time either close to the village but little away from the village, but not at the center of the village. There is a location. If for any reason, if the child goes into that village or into that main village or into the house, there are frequent prescription, please don't come. Sometimes they are beaten. Sometimes really there are all kinds of problems. Even people go to the extent of, honor killing. In Haryana, in the 2 years before, there were 4 honor killings. Why? Because the Dalit boy fell in love with an upper caste girl. And the parents had no problem in killing both of them. So just to protect your caste purity, you go to the extent of killing. But there have been amazingly interesting intercaste marriages. Unbelievable intercaste marriages have taken place. And those marriages have taken place here. Interestingly, the Europeans are open. I have seen some of these boys from this background married girls from UK, Germany, even in US. A few months back, I had been to Columbia as a Fulbright scholar, and there is a nearby city, Philadelphia. One of my old students was doing some job. This boy from a slum in Bombay. I think those who had been to Bombay would imagine what is Bombay slum. Gary would understand. Virtually nothing, is a small hut, and whenever there is a rain, it's flooded. Finished. It's only pig also cannot enter that. From a background of that house, a boy reached there. Because through affirmative action, he got his master's degree, a lot of encouragement. And finally, through some support, he reached there. He was working in some company, he fell in love with the girl. And the boy did not know who she was, and she did not know who the boy. So ultimately, she proposed, shall we get married? At that point of time, this boy told, I will be most happy, but before that you should come and see my house. If it is okay, I have no issue. Then the boy was called to a girl's house. It's a huge house. And that man happened to be an upper caste, Mathur caste from Delhi. Now they were shocked to know this, first of all. But I don't know whether it is good or bad. But here, throughout Europe or UK or in US, if once the girls decide, parents have not much control. They will go and get married, that boy. This has been the trend. Whereas in India, we have a system. Generally, that is not encouraged. But here, nobody can stop that process. So ultimately, they tried, but she refused to listen to the parents. Then they went to the slum to see, and they were really in trauma, shocked. They said, no, this cannot happen. But there is no way they could convince her. This boy got married. And I saw it. This can happen. And I know this is not the only case. There are cases happening. Point is, so there were relations. So once you move out to a faraway place where you cannot afford to actually work on this, there are intercaste marriages taking place like this. A few number. And because of the white people, they have no issue. They don't understand much, fortunately, what caste is all about. So whenever there is some love, the marriage takes place quickly, and it's going on. I have a number of such cases. But in rural area, this you cannot imagine. If somebody elopes, he is killed. Most cases, this is a very serious problem. And I tell you, I don't blame the Brahmin or a Kshatriya Vaishya. This is a disease, in my opinion. Caste is a disease. The Dalits also believe as strongly as the Brahmins. The Dalits is not one homogeneous category. There is a hierarchy among the Dalits. And there is upper caste untouchable, there are lower caste untouchable. They believe in caste as much as the Brahmin believe. So, they also don't intermarry. Because it has gone so deep into their mind that for you forget everything but caste. So that is the situation. So the gravity of, if you go by this definition, the gravity of slavery is very high. Number one, I agree with you. Another important point I would add here, these affirmative action policies and the support has not been given to all those suffer from discrimination. Those, see, in the 30s and onwards, there was conversion. The scheduled caste, because of all this tyranny, some of them became a Christian, some of them became Sikh, some of them became Muslims, and some of them became a Buddhist. But the government recognized in the 1940 presidential order, only those who are in the Hinduism are called scheduled caste. Only when you qualify to be a scheduled caste, you are entitled for all these government protection and supports. And with a lot of fight in the 1989, the Buddhist, in 1956, the Sikh community, 3 communities, must be Sikhs, and there are 3 Sikh community, they also got this scheduled caste status. Because they said Sikhism is branch of Hinduism, and after conversion also untouchability is practiced within the Sikh temple. Conversion has not helped, and all these arguments, finally they have also been recognized scheduled caste. So they also get this protection. In 1989, after Dr. Ambedkar converted himself, in the 50s, large number of people of Dalits convert to Buddhism. And so you also have a sizable percentage of that population. In 1989, all the Buddhists demanded scheduled caste status, and that was granted. So right now, so Hindus converted to Sikhism, Buddhism, beside those who are in Hinduism, these three categories have been given the scheduled caste status, thus entitled to all these provisions. But those who are in Christianity and Islam have not been given the scheduled caste status. But among them also there is problem. In Islam is relatively better. Among them there is a very close, once you move into that you strictly follow their lifestyle, everything. So it is not much of a problem. But still there is an Ansari versus, Pathan. There is a caste. See, in India everybody belongs to a particular caste. Nobody came from Rome to say they are Christians. Nobody came from Dubai to say they are Muslims. Everybody was basically a Hindu convert. And wherever they go, they carry the caste. If you go to Christianity, caste is carried within the church. If you go to Buddhism, there is problem. And Sikhism, some of you must be knowing, there is a Gurudwara, Ravidasi Gurudwara temple. Among the Sikh, the Ravidasi is one category, scheduled caste. They are not entertained properly in the main Gurudwara. They have started their own Gurudwara, their own Sikh temple. And there is untouchability there, and there is a lot of fight going on. In Europe, I saw, in New York, I saw, even in UK, there is a Gurudwara temple. So Sikhism there is caste, Christianity there is caste, Islam there is relatively better, it's not so much of a problem, and Buddhism also it is still, because fortunately Buddhism you do not have many subcastes, only few subcastes. So the subcaste problem within, so what I am saying, it is not, you should not be mistaken, it is Brahmin versus the non-Brahmin. That is not the issue. It is the caste. Whoever in the caste, you will follow that, and then hierarchy is inevitable, untouchability, discrimination is inevitable, and see, the caste system is such a scientific institution that you don't have to do anything. In order to keep my position as an upper caste, it is necessary for me to keep somebody below me so that my position is retained. So it is a structural necessity for everybody to practice caste discrimination so that your position is intact. So that is what the situation is all about. I don't know whether I have answered your questions all correctly. You can come back the second round or the during tea. Any other question, please? Yes, sir.
May I ask about Christian communities that I've visited in South India, where maybe there are Dalits who converted 2-3 generations ago, and then the young people of the families today, going through education, find they're discriminated against because the Christians are regarded as an advanced community. But I mean, they're Dalits and they can't change their caste. How do those two things, they seem to be conflict?
As I said earlier, in India everybody belongs to a particular caste. Irrespective of which religion you belong, but your caste identity remains intact. So in Tamil Nadu or many other states, over 80% of the Christians are from this background. 80% or more than 80% of the people of Christian community by and large belong to this community. And interestingly, there are some upper castes also. I looked at some of the data, and the total Christian population, over 80% are from Dalit background, but of the top position within the church, 80% of them are held by the non-Dalits. Is usual, very interesting. All the top positions within the church are held by the upper caste Christians, and there is a caste. There is separate cremation ground, separate burial ground, separate prayer, separate church. All those things are there even today. I think 4 years before in Gujarat, there was a reverend. He passed away. And as usual, he was buried within the church premise. But the upper caste Christian raised an objection, and with the support of some local right-wing group, they came and dug the ground, they threw the body within the church. And that was informed to the Minority Commission. The team of people went there and investigated all those things. This is happening even in cities. And they're saying it is one point, caste is a disease. So in the moment one Indian sees another Indian, his first thing that he is looking for what caste he belongs. First thing that comes to his mind is what caste he belongs. And he may be more comfortable with the Europeans or Americans, but he is not as comfortable unless he belongs to the same caste. So this problem is very, very strong. We are really grappling with it. I agree with you.
Jackie, I think, and then Joel. Yeah.
For the question, for instance, before I ask the question I was going to ask, when you say an Indian meeting another one is what caste, what is there a clue in the name? Or what's the surname?
What is that? Yeah. Surname is very common, and most of the surname, in 90% cases, you can make out the caste background. The surname is an indication of one's caste background. But in the history, there were movement, people made a lower caste adopting the title of an upper caste as a revolt. There have been cases of this kind. And if you go to Tamil Nadu, it's not everybody is carrying a surname. In Tamil Nadu, you hardly find a surname. Nobody will have a surname. Everybody will start with the initial. Father's initial, first name and the name. You will not find. Except the Brahmins will always add Iyer, Iyengar, these are the Brahmin. All other communities will not add these caste titles. I don't know, it's deliberate, I don't know. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you for saying that. With apologies for my ignorance about Hinduism, I was quite shocked at your example of the GCSE religious studies book with this nonsense.
Yeah.
And steps could be taken about that, but the question that occurs to me is, how intrinsic to, how necessary is caste to Hinduism? In other words, could an understanding of the religion and beliefs and daily practices be taught in English schools, leaving out caste, or is caste truly part of Hinduism, or can it be totally separated from it?
Very, very, very interesting question. Actually, very important question.
Which separates the two?
If you ask me, I don't think that you can explain Hinduism without relating to caste. It's just not possible, because the foundation of Hinduism is Varnashrama Dharma. So you cannot have Hinduism without actually relating to caste.
So therefore, if it's going to be taught, an understanding is going to be given in English.
It is a real problem, because I don't know what is the alternative. Can a person be a Hindu without relating himself to a caste? And caste is a problem. That is why Ambedkar said no reform is possible. It's annihilation of caste only possible. And Mahatma Gandhi clearly told, annihilation of caste means elimination of Hinduism. I am not telling, Gandhi himself has told. How can you allow that to happen? I mean, it's a very serious issue. Yes?
We think it should be taught about in English schools with discussion of the caste implications aspects. You're saying beliefs can't be pulled apart, separated from the socio-economic system of regulating society.
See, I mean, to be on the practical side, the Dalit people do not want being labelled as untouchables. At least having come all the way here, settle our business, they are having a comfortable life, they don't want to be told by the rest of the people that you are an untouchable, you belong to this background, all those. It will cause a lot of a humiliating experience for the children. So they don't want this to happen. So on the other hand, if at all you want to explain what Hinduism is all about, one has to avoid it. But if you avoid, the explanation is not complete. The one best way is to say, yes, there are 4 varnas, this is how, and they are hierarchically arranged. Need not go into these kind of details where they are to be treated like a dogs, and those they could avoid. Practical side. Actually, it's a big question. How will you deal with a caste when caste is Hinduism? That means, in fact, when I made a presentation in the Coventry, the response was, you are attacking Hinduism. They were very annoyed. They were actually telling me, you are attacking Hinduism. But that was not my intention. That is never my intention. I am just saying these are historical truth, facts. If we want to explain, this is how, there is no other way. It may be pleasing for somebody, I'd say, no, it's very nice. But as an academician, I cannot lie just to please somebody. Yeah.
Joel, and then Vic, and then back.
Yeah.
I must me that looking at the way in which theological innovation has occurred over time, I wonder whether your pessimism regarding resources within Hinduism may be a little bit kind of too severe, because it seems to me that other kind of world religions have found resources within scriptures to justify and validate positions that were previously seen as being completely antithetical, like Christianity as it pertains to slavery, Christianity as it pertains to questions of gender, Islam as it pertains to slavery. I mean, the Quran clearly specifies and validates and codifies slave relations, yet there are provisions within the Quran which constrain the terms on which slavery can be legitimately practiced. And that in itself was sufficient to develop an abolitionist argument. So I guess I'm wondering, is there really so limited scope for theological innovation? Are there other resources pertaining to equality, just treatment, and the like that can be drawn upon within Hinduism?
Again, a very good question. See, in Christianity, in my limited understanding, that the God did not separate the mind and the body. In Christianity, in Christian theology, there is no separation of mind and body. But in Hinduism, mind and body separation is always there. Not only separation, there is polluted body. There is a divine body, there is a polluted body. And in the divine body is necessary to house the divine spirit. So it is a structural necessity that some body has to be dirty in order to keep the other body clean. So the very existence of divinity is based on this structure. So at the most I can say the scope for such a theological intrusion seems very, very limited in my understanding. Because in Christianity, although there were utterances which used for slavery, but there were many other things which could really lay hand and throw this, suppress the other things. But here, I don't find much of those things. Maybe the one concept is there, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, meaning the whole world is universe and we are all brothers and sisters, let us be together. So some of those kind of a thing probably projected so much and people should work on it, and that means the endogamy should be abolished, meaning marrying within the caste. That should not be allowed. It should be across caste, for which people are not prepared. But there are some good people. In fact, one of the first person who reacted immediately about that magazine I showed there was one Mr. Sharma. In that Coventry meeting, there was one Mr. Sharma. Immediately he jumped and he said, this has to be banned. This has to be banned. So we only hope that more and more educated people, liberal-minded people will come among the Hindus and will take up such cause. Though you have a structure, though you have a division, still they may be open. Say, I am willing to have marital relation with anybody, subject to this. So ignoring that structure, a Hindu, if he comes forward, and in my opinion, it is slightly moving on that direction. With the education exposure to liberal traditions and other countries' culture, people are slowly, very, very slowly, there is a scope. But that is the only way. You just dump that structure. There is no Brahmin, no Kshatriya, no Vaishya, no Shudra. Just forget it. I am educated, you are educated, let us become together as a family. If that direction, if the people are willing, that is the only way we can make some dent, in my opinion. Theologically, my opinion, scope is very, very limited.
Right, but we've got Nick and then the sister at the back. I think that we'll just take those two questions and then we'll wrap up the formal bit of the session.
Mine goes back to something that David was asked about, and it's in relation to the independence movement during empire and colonisation and the fight against the British. And the reality is Gandhi wasn't the only person, the only figure fighting for independence. So regardless of what Gandhi was saying or Caste, there were other leaders at the time like Nehru, and obviously Nehru in 48 was quite unequivocal. There was no place for Caste in a modern secular Indian state. It'd be interesting to see what Nehru was saying prior to independence, for instance, to see if he was equally about caste prior to independence, and the other leadership were as well. I'd be interested to know if you could any comment on that. And the other thing is that also, and of course the British Empire was known for its skill at dividing and rule. And it strikes me that caste is a perfect system for assisting a ruling external power to divide and rule. So it was actually in the interest of the British powers to maintain caste, not to actually remove caste. So there's lots of contradictions going on there, and I'd like to view on that. And the other thing is in relation to what happened post-independence, which is there was a pretty unequivocal statement at the time that caste did not have any place to play in a new democratic Indian state. And that brings me back to the notion of Hinduism and religion. And it seems to me that they weren't taking on Hinduism and criticising Hinduism. I mean, there's no reason why Hinduism cannot have these four categories. It's not necessarily damaging to have these four categories. What's damaging is the fact that they have a social and economic impact, political impact. And what they were saying was we just ignore Hinduism. It will wither and die on the vine because we will create a modern secular state and people realise in our education programmes that actually Hinduism does not have a role to play in social and economic matters. And that seems to have failed somewhere. And I'm interested to know why you think that failed, why that strategy didn't actually achieve what it set out to achieve.
As I said, when there is a contest between the caste laws and the constitutional laws, and invariably the caste laws wins. And this was something that we earlier also. You have a caste law which people believe. You have a constitutional law which is a mandatory thing used in an official setting. But all our social life, it is the caste laws that operates. And to this constitutional law percolating down to the social life, I don't know how long it was going to take. But even in cities like this, there are issues of caste discrimination. In rural area, we cannot imagine. But I only hope, as you rightly said, that's what even Ambedkar was saying. The sooner you start valuing constitutional laws, better it is for the country. But, it is a simple human logic. For example, I am a Brahmin or any other upper caste. I get status without doing anything. I am a god on the earth. Brahmin friends don't, it's only for an example. I am a god on earth. I may be an illiterate person. I may be even mentally not developed. But because I come from that tradition, I have automatically gained that status. So anybody in rural area, it is very common. Any Brahmin goes, any people will bow down. And he will raise his hand and bless. So something for which actually I have no qualities, but still I get a status. Why should I give up? It is simple. Why should I give up? Free I get status and power, everything free, without doing any work. Why should I give up? Why should you hell with your constitutional laws? Why should I give up? And on the other hand, the people who are supposed to actually revolt against such things, also fearful that if I say anything against this man, who is nothing but a god, he may curse me, and my whatever little livelihood I am entitled, that will also go away. So it is so deep rooted in the minds of the lower class, because most of the people Indian people are God fearing, very God fearing. Some of person like me, it's a different issue, but 90% of the people are very, very God fearing. So they are scared of antagonizing people from that community. One is they have a power, money power, land, everything is there. On top of it, the blessing of God. So you have all those things. People value that than your constitutional laws. And those who implement constitutional laws also follow that caste law. So the success rate is very, very, very low unless one fight. Or those educated are really ashamed of saying that we belong to this caste, that caste we value. They will not say. These are the contexts in which the constitutional laws have worked. But this is not to undermine some of the few finest people from this Brahmin community who even laid down their lives for the development of this community. There are few people. There was one B.D. Sharma, who was a commissioner of the Scheduled Caste Commission, who was even beaten by chappals by the local people because he was voicing for the cause of the Scheduled Caste. There are few examples of this kind. So one cannot simply undermine these things. And I know some of my close friends are from that so-called upper caste community. Of course, they will not never talk caste, I will shout at them. But that is the relationship we have. And see, as a Hindu, if you don't follow your caste, that you are not a Hindu. Anybody says, I am a Brahmin, I said, if you are interacting with me, that you are no more a Brahmin. You are outcast already. It's like that. So constitutional law is the best solution, and that is what everybody emphasized. That is why we have got a political democracy. Unless this is transformed into social democracy, then it has no meaning. And that's what Ambedkar pleaded there.
Last question there. Yeah.
Well, I'm just slightly unsure as to what level of motivation and desire there is within India to get rid of this caste system. And is it coming from the government, and the government driving it to try and get rid of it and find resistance from society in general, or is the government against change, or where is the
there is no special project, there is no special initiative to get rid of caste. Getting rid of caste means getting rid of Hinduism, I am saying. So no government can afford to take those kind of a projects. There is no such things. There is absolutely no scope for getting rid of caste system. That's not possibility.
So they're trying to educate people of the lower caste at all?
They are only saying that, the only underlying assumption with the whatever guarantee given in the constitution, that once the lower castes are educated, given jobs in good position, decision-making power, they come, they will be able to deal with the atrocities, crimes, discrimination, those kind of issues. And the upper caste would learn not to discriminate them, and we can go on. So that is the, right now, the...
If I may interrupt.
Yes, please.
I'm sure you are aware, as I'm sure other people are, there is reservation in India.
Yeah.
In terms of jobs in the government sector, which goes up to, is it 40%?
Pardon?
Is it 40% of jobs are reserved for scheduled caste, backward caste, and other backward castes?
It is scheduled caste. It is
In education as well, if somebody wants to study engineering or medicine or any other category, there is legal reservation for lower castes. Yes, the government is taking positive affirmative action to try and reduce this. I agree with you 100% that Hinduism consists of caste. I am a devout Hindu. I read scriptures, and I'm very proud of that. The point is that, it goes down to education, and I do believe that the Indian government is taking positive affirmative action for the last 65 years of independence, as we call it, where there has been state education is free for all people up to primary stages. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes? So that up to GCSE level. Women education for universities in India is free for everybody. Okay? Equally, there is reservation within universities, colleges, and all state universities, again, which are some of the best in the world. I worked in that sector. I bring students to come and study in UK. And there is up to 40%. So yes, the government is taking affirmative action. I think what is difficult is because Hinduism is such a complex religion that bases itself on different castes, I think the only way to change that, you cannot take Hinduism away from India. It is a Hindu nation. 80% of the population are Hindus. The difficulty, I think, is in education and in terms of educating people about the nonsense that, you're born with a certain job in mind. That's the sort of, it just doesn't fit in with today's society and today's, so I think, I actually believe that, the government is taking very positive steps, and it has been taking for the last 40 or 60, 70 years. I might be wrong, but I think...
there is no denial of the... there is no denial of the fact, because since independence, the constitution was drafted by none other than Ambedkar himself. So there are constitutional provisions of reservation, which I told you already, probably you came late. So there are schools all over, anybody can go, and probably you may not know is that most of these schools, including the school which I went to, you will have some 100, 200 students, one teacher sitting there, and whole day noise making. I don't know whether anybody visited schools. I'm telling you again, this is one. India is one of the governments, probably in the world, huge investment in social welfare, social sector, and the amount of investment going on into this kind of thing is really significant amount of money is invested. Unfortunately, these schools, probably it's a huge country, huge population, these schools are run in very bad shape, and the kind of thing starts very bad. Most of these reservations that applies to the government colleges are also in bad shape. The things are improving. I mean, I'm only hopeful that things are improving and people are changing, and we only hope for the best.
Well, I think, yes. I think if one thought about it in the UK context, for example, in terms of race and ethnic origin, the question is, okay, government may have been pushing for 62 years, but is the pace of change fast enough? If you think about ethnic minorities in this country, we now have outcomes which, whilst they're not iron laws, still show enormously strong associations, for example, between being of Bangladeshi and Pakistani origin and being in worst housing, poorest jobs, highest levels of unemployment, all the rest of it. Members of Parliament, black and minority ethnic groups have less than 3% of members of Parliament, where their population at large in the UK is 3 times that. So, there has been, it's not affirmative action, but there has been positive action in this country. The pace of change here is very, very slow and angers a lot of people. It sounds to me, from what you're saying, is that, again, whilst the outcomes are not iron laws, it is possible.
I just want to
add Caste to become a professor or become a president or whatever. The association between caste and certain occupations is still very, very strong. The pace of change is very, very slow. That seems to be the picture.
That's what.
Okay, well, shall we stop there? And I invite you all to come out and to continue the discussion with Ramaiah. Let us thank him in the